The history of the Maroons in Jamaica is one of resistance, autonomy, and cultural preservation. The term Maroons refers to enslaved Africans who escaped from colonial plantations and formed independent communities in the rugged mountains and forests of Jamaica. Over centuries, the Maroons built a unique society, defined by their resilience and determination to resist European control. The Maroon story is a crucial chapter in the history of African diaspora resistance, as well as the wider history of Jamaica and the Caribbean. In this video, we will trace the origins of the Maroons in Jamaica, their conflicts and treaties with the British, the evolution of their societies, and their legacy in contemporary Jamaica. Origins of the Maroons. Early Spanish period, 1494 to 1655. The Maroon story in Jamaica begins during the Spanish colonization of the island. The Spanish arrived in Jamaica in 1494, led by Christopher Columbus, and brought with them enslaved Africans to work on their plantations. The native Taino population, which had originally inhabited the island, was decimated by disease, enslavement, and violence. As a result, Africans quickly became the backbone of the Spanish labor system. However, from the outset, many of these enslaved Africans resisted their subjugation and sought freedom by escaping into the island's mountainous interior. These early runaways, known as cimarrones, Spanish for wild or untamed, took refuge in the thick forests and caves. This period marked the genesis of the Maroon societies in Jamaica. When the British captured Jamaica from Spain in 1655 during the Anglo-Spanish War, many Spanish colonists fled the island, abandoning their plantations and leaving behind a large population of enslaved Africans. Some of these Africans continued to resist and fled into the mountains, joining the existing groups of runaways. This would lay the foundation for the development of distinct Maroon communities under British rule. The British period and the rise of the Maroons, 1655 to 1739. The British takeover of Jamaica brought significant changes to the island's economy and social structure. The new colonial rulers transformed Jamaica into one of the most profitable sugar-producing colonies in the Caribbean, importing tens of thousands of Africans to work in the sugar fields under brutal conditions. Enslaved Africans became the majority population on the island, and resistance was a constant feature of the plantation system. The emergence of Maroon communities. From the early days of British rule, enslaved Africans continued to escape into the mountains. These groups coalesced into two main factions, the Leeward Maroons in the western part of the island and the Windward Maroons in the eastern regions. The most important Leeward Maroon settlement emerged in the rugged area known as the Cockpit Country, while the Windward Maroons dominated the Blue Mountains and the John Crow Range. In these mountainous regions, the Maroons developed self-sufficient societies. They built small, fortified villages known as Nanny Town, named after the legendary leader, Queen Nanny, in the east, and a kampong, named after Cudjoe's brother, in the west. Their villages were strategically located in inaccessible areas, allowing them to defend against British military expeditions. The Maroons used guerrilla tactics, learned from their African ancestors, and adapted to the Jamaican landscape to outwit and outfight the British soldiers. Their knowledge of the terrain, combined with their hit-and-run strategies, made them formidable adversaries. During the late 17th and early 18th centuries, several legendary leaders emerged among the Maroons. Among them were Cudjoe. The most famous leader of the Leeward Maroons, Cudjoe led the Maroons in the Cockpit Country and sustained resistance against the British. He was a brilliant military strategist and became a key figure in the First Maroon War. Nanny. The spiritual and military leader of the Windward Maroons, Nanny is celebrated for her role in defending Maroon territory and fostering unity among her people. She was a practitioner of Obeah, an African spiritual and healing practice, and is remembered as a symbol of resistance. Today, she is one of Jamaica's national heroes. Both leaders were instrumental in the Maroons' success in maintaining their autonomy and resisting British attempts to re-enslave them. The First Maroon War, 1728 to 1739. The increasing strength of the Maroons and their ability to disrupt British plantation life led to a prolonged conflict known as the First Maroon War. This conflict began in earnest in 1728 when the British governor, Sir Robert Hunter, launched a campaign to crush the Maroons. Over the next decade, the British would send thousands of troops into the mountains to confront the Maroons, but these efforts largely failed. The Maroons' use of guerrilla tactics, combined with their intimate knowledge of Jamaica's interior, made them nearly impossible to defeat. They would ambush British soldiers and then disappear into the dense forests. The Maroons also launched raids on plantations, freeing enslaved people and causing significant economic damage to the colony. The British found themselves in a costly and unwinnable war. The rugged terrain of the Cockpit Country and Blue Mountains was a major factor in the Maroon victory, as the British troops were unprepared for the difficulties of fighting in these remote areas. The Treaty of 1739. By 1739, the British realized that they could not defeat the Maroons militarily. As a result, they decided to negotiate peace. Two treaties were signed in 1739 and 1740, one with the Leeward Maroons led by Cudjoe and the other with the Windward Maroons. Under the terms of the treaty, the Maroons were granted autonomy in their territories and recognized as free people. In exchange, the Maroons agreed not to harbor runaway enslaved people from British plantations. The Maroons would assist the British in putting down slave rebellions and catching escaped enslaved people, thus reinforcing the colonial system of slavery. They were given land in perpetuity, where they could establish self-governing communities. The signing of the treaty marked the end of the First Maroon War and established a delicate peace between the Maroons and the British authorities. While the treaties recognized the Maroons' freedom and sovereignty, they also made the Maroons complicit in maintaining the system of slavery, a compromise that has been a subject of debate and reflection ever since. Post-treaty Maroon societies, 1740 to 1795. After the treaty, the Maroons established semi-independent communities in the Jamaican interior. They lived in small, self-sufficient villages, engaging in subsistence agriculture, hunting and trading with British settlements. The Maroon towns of Accompong, Trelawney Town, and Nanny Town became symbols of resistance and autonomy. Despite the peace, tensions simmered between the Maroons and the British colonial government. The Maroons were resented by plantation owners for their role in assisting the capture of runaway slaves, and there were periodic disputes over the boundaries of Maroon land. The Second Maroon War, 1795 to 1796. By the late 18th century, tensions between the Maroons and the British reached a boiling point, particularly in Trelawney Town, the largest and most influential Maroon settlement in western Jamaica. Several factors contributed to the outbreak of the Second Maroon War in 1795: land disputes. The Maroons felt that the British were encroaching on their lands, violating the terms of the treaty. Cultural suppression. The British attempted to exert greater control over Maroon society, which included imposing restrictions on their traditional practices. Rebellion on the horizon. The Haitian Revolution. 1791 to 1804 had instilled fear among the British that similar uprisings might occur in Jamaica. This led to a heightened sense of paranoia and tension between the British and the Maroons. In 1795, a conflict erupted when two Maroons from Trelawney Town were whipped for stealing pigs, a punishment they viewed as a severe affront to their status as free people. In response, the Maroons of Trelawney Town rose up in arms against the British, sparking the Second Maroon War. Unlike the First Maroon War, the Second Maroon War was short-lived. By this time, the British had a larger and more organized military presence in Jamaica, and they were better prepared to suppress the Maroons. The British also employed tactics such as cutting off the Maroons' food supply, which forced them into submission. In 1796, the Maroons of Trelawney Town were defeated. The British, fearing future rebellions, made the drastic decision to deport nearly 600 Maroons from Trelawney Town to Nova Scotia, Canada. These deported Maroons would later face harsh conditions in Canada, and many were eventually relocated to Sierra Leone in West Africa. The deportation of the Trelawney Maroons marked the end of major Maroon resistance in Jamaica. However, other Maroon communities, such as Accompong and Moortown, continued to exist and maintain their autonomy. The history of the Maroons has had a profound and lasting impact on Jamaica's identity and culture. Their successful resistance against British colonialism, their preservation of African cultural traditions, and their role in the island's social and political life make them a central part of Jamaican history. The Maroons have maintained many aspects of African culture, including
The Maroons
language,
also played a
music,
significant
and
role in
religious
preserving the
practices.
oral histories and
Their
folklore of
spiritual
Jamaica.
practices, such as
Stories of
Obeah
Queen
and
Nanny,
Lumina, have
Cudjoe, and
roots in
other
West African
legendary Maroon
traditions.
figures have been
Maroon
passed
music,
down through
particularly
generations
the use of
and
drums
continue
and
to
call and
inspire
response
Jamaicans
singing,
today.
has influenced
The Maroon
Jamaican musical
communities that
genres,
remain in
including
Jamaica, such
reggae.
as Accompong in St. Elizabeth and Moortown in Portland, are recognized as self-governing entities with their own leadership structures. Maroon leaders, known as colonels, are elected by the community and play a key role in maintaining the Maroons' cultural heritage and political autonomy. In modern Jamaica, the Maroons are celebrated for their contributions to the fight for freedom and independence. Queen Nanny, in particular, was declared a national hero in 1975, and the Maroons' resistance is seen as a precursor to the broader struggles for emancipation and decolonization. The Maroons have long been stewards of the land they inhabit, particularly the Cockpit Country, which remains one of Jamaica's most ecologically important regions. Today, Maroon communities are actively involved in efforts to protect the Cockpit Country from environmental degradation, particularly from the threat of bauxite mining. This environmental activism is a continuation of the Maroons' historical role in defending their land and autonomy. The Maroons of Jamaica are a testament to the power of resistance and the pursuit of freedom. From their origins as escaped enslaved people to their establishment of independent communities, the Maroons fought against colonial oppression and created a legacy that continues to shape Jamaica's cultural, social, and political life. Their story is not only one of conflict, but also of resilience, adaptation, and survival. Through their treaties with the British, the Maroons secured a degree of autonomy that allowed them to preserve their African heritage and develop unique societies in the Caribbean context. While the treaties came with compromises, the Maroons' ability to negotiate their freedom is a significant achievement in the broader history of African resistance to slavery. Today, the Maroons remain a vital part of Jamaica's cultural landscape, representing a living link to the island's African roots and its history of resistance against colonial domination. The Maroons' struggle for autonomy, their cultural preservation, and their ongoing efforts to protect their land and traditions ensure that their legacy will endure for generations to come.